stream, the lunch stream. I have not eaten lunch yet today. Have you eaten lunch today, Kurtis?
I did. I had 2 hot dogs.
2 hot dogs. Did you have buns with those hot dogs?
Yes, I did, and they had mayonnaise and ketchup. High
carb, but you're just like a skinny dude in general. So
yeah, so it's fine. Yeah, I don't mind eating hot dogs. I mean, I'm going to be 40 in a couple of years, and I expect that at that point stuff will start happening where I can't eat that kind of stuff anymore. Mine
happened at 30, and I just couldn't do it.
Oh, okay.
It's sad. I eat basically nothing at this point. So yeah, that has nothing to do with anything. Kurtis is the proprietor of the Epic Marvel podcast, which I put the website in the description. I've also put a link to the Facebook group, Epic Collection Speculation Discussion Admiration and Obsession Group, which is a great title. But there's a lot of really good comic book discussion in there, and it's like the only drama-free comic book group I've ever seen on the entire internet.
When drama starts creeping up, I'm pretty quick to squash it. I want it to be a nice place where everyone doesn't get all ugly and
starts creeping up. I'm pretty good.
Oops, sorry. No, yeah, it's been absolutely great. And people really have deep discussions about the books in there, which is fantastic.
Yep.
And which is like what I've been looking for years. There used to be I was on Usenet originally, if you remember that. And,
way back in the day.
I'd try to get discussions going on there. And there was always one troll on there who just like, no matter what you'd post, he'd just like come back with like, Kitty Pryde Shadowcat is hot. She's a badass. I love fighting. Yeah, bad and evil are good, and good is dumb. And he'd just post that on everything.
Oh boy.
But that's the original internet, and I don't think things have changed all that much on the internet for the most
part.
No,
and I think it doesn't matter what fan group you're a part of. You could be into, automobiles, or you could be into knitting, and like you'd still find those people who latch on to the like very specific things. And it's just the way the world works, and those people didn't have a voice before the internet, but now they do. So we get to hear them a whole lot more.
So exciting.
Yeah. But that's, it's as long as they're civil, I'll tolerate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kitty Pryde Shadowcat is hot, to be fair.
Right.
There's validity to his point that he continually made on the Usenet back then.
That's right.
If you're around and you still exist, whoever guy you are, come find me. I kind of miss those days. It was an instant time.
Maybe you should look up the Kitty Pryde Facebook fan groups and see who's running the show there.
That scares me.
Yeah.
But we're here. I really wanted to talk about the Epic collections. You guys might have noticed that I've been reviewing a lot of Epic collections because that's basically all I read. And they look like this. They're pretty thick books, and usually they have about 20 to 25 issues. Is that about right?
It depends on the era. In the 70s, when the page counts of the comics were smaller, you get about 25 issues in an Epic collection. But standard is about 20 issues. Some are smaller because they load them up with double-sized one-shots and anniversary specials or graphic novels, that kind of stuff. So
which is kind of fun because a lot of the times, especially like with the 90s ones, I would have read a lot of those issues like of the main line in the 90s, but I would never have like picked up that random graphic novel or whatever, or even known it existed. And so getting to read those has been pretty awesome.
I agree. When I was first buying comics, I'd take my my small allowance and bike ride down to the comic book store. I could only buy a couple of comic books here or there, and so I'd pick up SpiderMan and X-Men and that kind of stuff. But I didn't have anything left over for the original graphic novels that were $6 or something like that, or any of those special issues. Because when you only have a limited budget, you're only going to buy the main issue. You're not going to splurge for the extra stuff. So,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but these Epic collections are fantastic in that it's collecting everything from that era that's specific to that character. So they have the annuals, they have the specials, they have relevant miniseries and that kind of thing. All in this really, really nice package, and it's fantastic. I really like it.
It's pretty cool. Yeah, I love it when there's a big run collected. And for those who don't know, when they come out with these, they don't come out with them in order, which is very interesting also because this is kind of an experimental thing. I don't think I've ever seen anybody do something like this. But you see, this is Silver Surfer Volume 13. And of Silver Surfer right now, there's only Volume 1, 3, 6, 7, and 13 out, or maybe it's 7 and 8, something like that.
6 and 7, yeah.
6 and 7. And so they've kind of just been hodgepodging them here and there. And it seems like the original intention when they first started coming out in 2014 was to collect stuff that really people hadn't seen collected before. So you'd get really random stuff like the Thor stuff I've been reviewing lately, which I was not so fond of. But you wouldn't get like Walt Simonson's Thor because it's been collected like 100 times, right?
Right.
And then they'd kind of migrate to the early stuff because everybody wants the Stan and Jack stuff. But they'd come out with random stuff you probably hadn't read before, and that was pretty neat. And I kind of like the way they do it, though at the same time I'm frustrated sometimes because like there's like Amazing Spider-Man has volume 16 missing, but has like volume 15 through 23 other than that collected, and I want to read the whole thing in a row. So I don't know. What do you think about that? I mean, it gets me reading things that I wouldn't normally read, I think, but I'm not sure on it.
I think that, well, first of all, I love it. I love the out of orderness of it. It is frustrating, but Epic Collections, they've been doing a good job of releasing the volumes that they do choose at the beginning of creator runs, and then they'll release the subsequent volumes after that. So it's not like we're actually getting random volumes. We are actually getting it's actually thought through. So yeah, we're not getting the Walt Simonson stuff, but the Thor stuff, they started the first volume started the DeFalco and Ron Frenz run, and then they released the first volume of the Doug Mensch run, which is the one that you reviewed, and then they released the very first volume 1 with Stan and Jack. So you have 3 starting points, and then all of the volumes that they've released after that have been subsequent volumes of those 3 starting points. So if you want to just pick up a certain era of Thor, then you can kind of jump right in and do that.
That's
the reason why for Spider-Man Volume 16 is missing, because it's the second half of the Tom DeFalco run, which they've released the first volume, and they just haven't got to the second volume yet because they've got a few other starting points that they've been filling in.
So I am so mad though on this one that they're choosing to release Maximum Carnage instead of that though, because that Maximum Carnage has been re-released so many times. I get it from their perspective though right now though, because it's smart to put that out right after Absolute Carnage is going to be in trade paperback, so everybody's going to get all the Carnage stuff, and it makes sense. But I'm still angry about it.
Well, and every time a volume is released, there's someone upset that it's not the volume that they wanted, or it's like, why are they reprinting this for the millionth time? Stan and Jack's stuff has been reprinted to death. So, but then the other people are like, well, why are we getting the Doug Mensch stuff? That stuff is terrible. The Thor stuff. Why don't we get some really good stuff? So there's people on both sides of the fence.
That's
people
true.
Who want the good stuff first, or people who want the unreleased stuff first. The reason it's unreleased so far, or uncollected and unreprinted, is because it's not the best stuff. So if we get all that stuff first, we'll get it all out of the way, and all of the volumes that we're going to be getting are just going to get better and better because they're saving all the best stuff for last.
It is kind of nice in that regard, especially with like Thor, Iron Man, Fantastic Four. They kind of really did that. They got all this stuff out of the way that's not the best. Uh-oh, we're frozen. Am I frozen or are you frozen? I can't tell. You're back. Okay. I think we froze up for a second there. This happens.
I'm back.
Yeah.
Okay. So you were saying, when did I lose you?
The early ones in 2014, 2015 for like Iron Man and Thor and Fantastic Four, they really did release a lot of the like bleh content that really is good to get out of the way for sure.
Yeah, that first volume of Avengers, The Final Threat.
Oh, yeah.
Which is, let me see. Hold on a second. I'm going to grab it. It's out of print now, and it's like people really want this reprinted because you can't get it for anything at a reasonable price. But it's just a hodgepodge of different things. This was a weird time in Marvel when they went through like 3 editor-in-chiefs in like 2 years or something like that.
Oh wow!
And so
they just switched directions all over. Yeah.
Yeah, and so this run has stuff by Jim Shooter. It has stuff by Jerry Conway and Jim Starlin, Steve Englehart. Like there's a hodgepodge of different issues collected in here, and there's no like overarching story arc or anything like that, which is why it hasn't been collected, because the old way of collecting Marvel trades was you do it by either story arc or by creator, and this volume doesn't fall in either of those categories. So it's nice that we have a line that's trying to reprint all of Avengers from start to finish,
Right.
Volume 1, because all of these issues that have been orphaned or left without a home because of the way that Marvel has historically collected their trades now has a spot.
Nice. Mark Pellegrini has a question. When are they going to reprint Wolverine Volume 1 and X-Men Volume 1? You missed out on those. I think Wolverine already got a reprint. Did I miss that?
I don't know if it has or not. It is currently out of print, so that one we have to wait on. X-Men is getting a reprint though in December, so you will just have a couple months to wait for that one, and it will be back in stock.
Yeah. What's great is that they also said that they're going to perpetually keep the volume 1s in print. So that'll make it easy for people who want to start from the beginning, which is a good policy because, I think those probably, I don't know. I haven't watched the sales as closely as you. Do the volume 1s typically outsell the other volumes by drastic amounts?
Well, it depends on the volume. It depends on the title, I mean. But the classic ones that are all Stan and Jack, absolutely. Yeah. Anything, and even the volume 2s and volumes 3s in the Stan and Jack era, they all sell super well. That stuff is always going to sell well, and they can keep reprinting it until the cows come home, and it's going to keep on selling.
Yeah. I mean, I probably bought the Amazing Spider-Man Stan and Jack stuff in... this is the, I guess, inheritor of the Essential line, which was they did all these in black and white to make it affordable for everybody a long time ago. But I've bought those in Essential, I've bought them in Epic Collection, and I've bought them in Omnibus, and probably random stuff here and there also.
Right.
So
yeah, exactly. Yep. And it's I like it. I like the Epic Collection because we don't have to start at volume 1 again for the 15th time.
Yeah.
The fact that we get to start in the 80s is great, I think, because that's the stuff that if you've been collecting all those other lines, or if you collect the Masterworks, that's the stuff that's not going to come out for a long, long time in those other lines.
It's super fun. I've discovered a lot of stuff that I would not have read otherwise through this. And we were actually talking this morning about this because I started reading Silver Surfer Volume 3, which is the 1987 run. And you guys might have seen me post this stuff if you're watching my social media, because I'm reading it, and I tend to post little snapshots from my treadmill when I'm reading.
Yeah.
It's. I mean, this is all phenomenal stuff. Like I love the art. I love the art style of this early 80s Silver Surfer, and it reminds
Marshall Rogers.
It's so good. It's I don't know. It's vibrant and cartoony, and the coloring is just like it reminds me a lot of the Jack Kirby coloring, where there's just random splashes of red or blue or just random colors out there that just makes it pop compared to a lot of modern comics. Reminds me a lot of Mike Allred. I guess Mike Allred reminds me of this, is the way I should say it. But
I think there's a similar inking style there too. Marshall Rogers doesn't rely on heavy spot blacks and cross hatching and that kind of stuff like, I don't know, George Perez or something like that, right? Which is same as Mark Allred. He leaves his style is a little bit more flat, I guess you could say, in that sense. Uses a lot of solid colors to create the depth, and Marshall Rogers does the same thing. In fact, Marshall Rogers is the colorist for his issues in those Silver Surfer books, so he definitely has a vision. Oh,
Marshall Rogers colored Mike Allred's Silver Surfer stuff?
Sorry. Marshall Rogers colored his own issue.
Okay, got
Silver Surfer. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that makes sense. That's great. And you don't see a lot of artists doing that, especially because it takes a lot of time to do all that.
Yeah.
But I would have never checked this out. We were talking about how I never read Silver Surfer back then and didn't care about it, nor had any interest in it, nor did you.
Nope.
And yet this is some very interesting stuff that actually, it feels like they can get a little more experimental than with the like standard superhero lines.
Can I tell you a little anecdotal story of my childhood?
Sure.
So my cousin is a big comic book fan too, and when we were young, I was probably like 8 or 9 or something like that. I was having a sleepover at his house, and his dad read to us at bedtime Silver Surfer annual. I don't remember what it is, but it's the first part of Atlantis Attacks.
Oh, sweet.
It was so boring. I hated it. And that
everybody loves Atlantis Attacks now, though.
Yeah. Maybe in context it would have been better if I'd read the other parts or something, but that one issue was just a drag for me when I was 9 or whenever it was. And so thereon, that colored my opinion for Silver Surfer for many, many years until the Epic Collections came out, and I actually gave them a try. And there are definite highlights in the Silver Surfer books.
That's funny. Yeah, it's amazing how one experience, especially when you're a kid, it's just like you will make that snap judgment, and you're in or you're out, and it's over. And
don't care about Silver Surfer.
All right, so I'm going to pull up your website real quick because I just want to show people what you do, which is what drew me to you. This is the Epic Marvel Podcast, and it's a great resource for a lot of stuff. If you like the epics or you're even interested in them, I'm going to go right to the Epic Collection Guide.
Sure. And
you see on you see on Kurtis's shelf there, Drake actually made a point that they look great on the shelves. They do. They really with like even though they're not perfect, they're sort of matching spines with the colors and the black. It's very slick looking, which is really awesome. And I do appreciate that. But you've got a nice guide. So if you are just interested, here's the best part. Say you're just interested and you only love the Punisher. Well, you just go down to the Punisher and you can ignore every other deal and just read all about the Punisher. And these are the ones that they have out. You've actually detailed what issues are in each one, so people can actually go and find these and look for them. This is an incredible resource for just seeing what's out and what people might be interested in.
And I try to keep it up to date as much as I can whenever there's new announcements, which we should hopefully be getting some, I would say, maybe Saturday night or early Sunday morning. We should maybe get some more announcements. I will update this guide as soon as I have content information. So because a lot of the times the Hachette catalog will release the names of the volumes, but we don't know what the contents are. So I don't want to place it in the guide until I know for sure what volume number it is.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's exciting. That's exciting for me. I always look for these announcements and what's going to come out.
So also click on check out this cool spreadsheet, because I really like this. I'm very proud of this.
Where's the spreadsheet? Oh, check out this cool spreadsheet.
Yeah.
That's literally what it was.
I love this. I put together this visual guide of what the Epic Collections collect in context of everything else. So you can see the top bar outlines the years. Quarter just means what month did it start, what quarter of the year did it start in, because I'm not breaking it down by 12. And you can see that the 70s is very undercollected, and a lot of the Silver Age, the 60s, is now complete.
It's almost done. Yeah.
And scroll over to the 90s there. That's a good representation of what is out currently in the Epic Collections.
That's the hodgepodge. And the weird part is we always assumed that it was going to stop with Onslaught, which is where I pretty much stopped collecting comics in general, with rare exceptions. And that's kind of where the Marvel Universe kind of took a retcon turn, I would say. And they'd start having these events all the time that would just retcon characters all the time. It became very, very difficult to keep up with things or, care about characters in my opinion. That coincided with Marvel's bankruptcy. And when they went bankrupt, they had to make a lot of big changes in their the higher up positions. A lot of those changed. And with that came a lot of editorial mandates and changes to see how they can run things differently in order to maximize their dollar or whatever. And so that's when they started outsourcing all of their books to Image. That's where Heroes Reborn came from. And then the other one is they started outsourcing. That was a mistake.
They outsourced their Marvel Knights stories to Joe Quesada's company, and so that's where all of those volumes stop, and the new number one started, and it sort of ushered in this new era. And we still get like
Wolverine up through even 2000, which is kind of crazy to think about, because especially with the X-Men continuity getting so jumbly during that 90s time.
So there's one volume in there that is just, it's I think it's volume 13. Shadows of Apocalypse. It's every issue of Wolverine in that one, almost every issue ties into the larger picture, but they don't include the larger picture issues. So like they see if I can find it for you. Every issue has well, not every issue, but very close to every issue has a text box at the top saying, here's what you missed because we didn't include all of the other issues. I just got to find so here, this one.
So that's got to be pretty painful to read.
Yeah, so it's it's hard to read because it's very disconnected. A lot of stuff happens between the issues and between the gaps. That's one of the downsides of the Epic Collection when you have a large Marvel universe. But that's
there's not much of a downside for that. I mean, until you get up to about 90, because they really didn't have all that much until that point.
Exactly. And when they did cross over, it was with one issue for one 2-part special or something, and then they include that in the book. Wolverine, that's a very rare exception.
Yeah, I'm surprised they're actually going that far with the Wolverine Epic Collections.
Yeah.
Interesting call.
Well, there's not really a good stopping point otherwise. I mean, you could stop it in the middle of a creator run, but if I don't know if their mandate really is to collect all of the first volume, but the first volume of Wolverine doesn't stop till like 2004 or something like that.
Oh, interesting. Huh. I was never much of a Wolverine fan, and I never read much of his stuff until I started with the Epic Collections, which I've read 1 and 2 at this point. What I should get back to here is you actually run a show about, and that's why it's the Epic Marvel Podcast.
Yeah.
And you go through and you do in-depth discussions of each volumes here. So you look at what we've got. You've got a whole library of just like huge discussions, and you might see my reviews are like, here I'm flipping through this as quickly as possible. I kind of liked it. You go through and you talk about each issue in depth. I mean, some of these go like 2-3 hours, and it's the most in-depth discussion I've ever seen on comic books anywhere on the internet.
Well, that's good. Yeah, I wanted to do a Marvel podcast, and well, first of all, I don't read any of the modern stuff, so I couldn't do anything on modern. And also, who needs another modern Marvel podcast? There's zillions of them out there, but there aren't that many podcasts about the 60s, 70s, 80s of Marvel, or the 90s. And if they do, they focus on, maybe there's a SpiderMan specific podcast or an X-Men specific podcast. And so I wanted to be able to jump around. When these Epic Collections came out, I was like, this is great, because I feel like one volume is a good amount of content for one episode. So I'm using them as my guide. As you can see, I'm also releasing my episodes out of order. Yeah. So following the Epic Collections model there, we're not starting with the volume 1s of all of them.
How do you choose what to read? Do you just whatever strikes your fancy?
Well, so I have a different co-host for every volume. And so I often will leave that decision up to my co-host to see what they want to read. And the same thing happens. Like my co-host for the Thor volumes is my cousin Craig, whom I talked about earlier, we read that Silver Surfer comic as kids. And he wanted to start with the DeFalco Friends stuff. And so when we got around to doing a second episode, he wanted to do the second part.
Nice.
Yeah. And then
I'm excited to get to those.
they're great. It's just it'll bring you back. It's just got such a great old school feeling. I love Tom DeFalco because he's so good at that soap opera comic book drama that was so prevalent during the 80s and 90s.
Yeah. And I think everybody here knows pretty much that Tom DeFalco and Ron Frenz are my favorite creators, hands down. So yeah.
They did a lot. It was good stuff.
Yeah, so they did a pretty long Thor run. Now Tom DeFalco did Fantastic Four. Friends wasn't on Fantastic Four, I don't think, though.
No, that was the late Paul Ryan was his artist for Fantastic Four, and that one is I've said it here. A lot of people don't agree with me, but it's my favorite Fantastic Four run is Tom DeFalco's, because he has.
I 100% agree with you.
Yeah, he's got such a good handle on the characters. and also the ongoing soap opera of it, and also the just bringing it back, scaling things back a little bit from the big bombastic Walt Simonson stuff that came before it, which was great. The Walt Simonson Fantastic Four is just bonkers with time travel and all that kind of stuff. But when you get then to the DeFalco stuff, and it just kind of like you relax in it, and you just sit and let it kind of wash over you, because it's like, oh yeah, this is really familiar, even though these are all new stories. And he gets a lot of flack for, Sue got a costume change and all this kind of stuff, right?
That was the one where she like really had like almost wearing no clothes, right?
Yeah.
I gotta say, when I was 12, I liked that.
Yeah, and it was only for like, I don't know, not even a year, and she switched the costume to something different after that. And there was an actual in continuity comic reason why she wore that costume. So it's not like, sure, they were doing it to kind of jump on the Image bandwagon that was happening at the time, Witchblade and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, it made sense, and it didn't last for very long. It's a flash in the pan.
Let me see if I can find out. Oh yeah, I found an image of it, so I can show everybody what we're talking about here. Let me see if I can download this. This is really funny.
It's got the window,
It's got the window. It's out of control. But here we go.
There it is. Yeah,
there it is.
In fact, that must be a newer picture, because
it is. The coloring's a little different.
Yeah.
Let's see.
I don't know where that comes from.
Okay, I've got somebody put up a one that says before or after. This is really funny. Let me see if I can grab this. Oh man. Let's make this bigger. Oh, can I make it bigger? There we go. Okay. All right. This is the live element of this, so it's just fun.
Yep.
Here we go. Before.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But again, she had that for a very short time, and then she switched to what I think is one of her best costumes. So I don't know if you can.
How do I even look that up? Because I'm kind of like, let's see.
Fantastic Four, I think around issue number.
I just looked up Sue Richards' boob window, and that's how I found this one. So.
Yeah, right. That works. Yep, that works. Okay, let's see if I can find one here. Oh yeah.
You can actually share your screen. There's a share your screen button right by settings at the bottom.
Right by share screen. So can you see this?
It's not popping up yet.
Okay.
Did you hit OK?
Let me see. Oh, I have to say.
This is a good comment by Sam. Oh man, her clothes started to disappear too. That's cute.
Yeah.
I'm patiently awaiting because I don't remember. Are you talking about the Heroes Reborn?
No. Around issue. Okay, so it's issue number 388. Go to issue number 388. Look at the cover for that one.
Okay.
I don't know how to get my screen to share, so it's not letting me. So I'll let you do that.
All right, I will grab this, and this is her next costume.
Yeah, it's just a variation on the original, the one with the window. But I like it. I think it's just a really nice costume.
Okay, here we go. All right.
See, it reflects the original Stan and Jack costume, but it's just a more updated look. I think it's just the shoulders are revealed, and that's really the biggest difference there. But it's a nice. I think it's a nice costume.
Yeah, I actually think I prefer this. This is about perfect. Cool.
Yep. It's good.
All right. Yeah.
There you go. But I'm looking forward to the rest of that. I think there's 2 more volumes worth of Tom DeFalco Fantastic Four epics that should hopefully come out sometime, because they've collected the beginning of it, which was the second half of what was that volume called? The New Fantastic Four. which is
That's
the end
right.
of the Walt Simonson run and the beginning of the Tom DeFalco run. And then they've also collected the last bit of the Tom DeFalco run called Strange Days, which leads right into Onslaught. And so there's 2 volumes right in the middle there that we're missing, and there's some really good stuff in there.
Hopefully those get announced in the next deal here. That'd be great.
I like that. We already got a Fantastic Four volume coming up in this next round of Epic,
shoot,
so
the Ben. That's right. Yeah,
by Ben Betrayed. I think that's volume 5, more Stan and Jack.
So unlikely, sad.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, this is so your podcast, like you said, has random episodes. I try to time my reading a little bit for what I know is going to be an upcoming episode, so I can kind of follow along as the episodes come out. I think it's a lot of fun. The only time I haven't done it so far is when you do Spider-Man, because I'm waiting for that volume 16.
Yeah, right, okay.
And actually, when you're doing Fantastic Four, because I think you just did that a recent or at least you recorded one.
I've recorded it. I haven't released that episode yet for New Fantastic Four. Yeah,
and I haven't gone to that because I'm kind of also waiting for that entire DeFalco run to run through that to read through those also.
Well, you can at least read the first half to get the finish of Simonson's run.
That's true.
There's a defanite stopping point right there before DeFalco starts.
Which volume's that? Fantastic. Let me go to the Epic Collection Guide. And go to
Volume 21.
All right. Yeah, okay, that's right. You were telling me this because I was like, there's 17, 18, and I'm like, I kind of want to wait for 19 and then just read that all the way through. And you told me 19 was not very good and not to worry about it, and then go right into 20.
Yeah, so 19 is the end of Steve Englehart's run, and he was kind of he wasn't treated very well by Marvel at that point, and he sort of checked out for those.
Where have I heard about this story before about a creator not treated well?
Yeah, right. It happens over and over. So I've the other thing that I do for my podcast is I have creator interviews. I do a lot of interviews with the people of this era. And I have a Steve Englehart run where we're talking about Fantastic Four. So if you want the skinny on what happened during his run,
well, we'll definitely listen to that.
Yeah, how it all went downhill. Go to that Epic Collection Guide or the episode index, because at the very bottom of it is an interview index as well.
Oh yeah, this is the cool part. So Kurtis gets all these awesome guys on for interviews, and it's I was trying to. Who was I trying to get? I was trying to get J.M. DeMatteis. How do you pronounce that?
DeMatteis.
DeMatteis. I was trying to get him recently, and I maybe almost got him on. So we'll see.
He's always willing to talk. He actually talks with his fans a lot. Yeah, he's a nice guy.
But I loved him back in the day. So you've got like pretty much. Let's see if I can make this big enough for people to actually read it. I mean, he's got a really extensive interview base. He's got Mike Barron. Mike Barron's been on here before, which is great. Let's see, Chris. You got Claremont a few times, which is awesome.
Yeah, and I have an interview about Miss Marvel that I'll be posting soon.
Oh, that's exciting. Cool. Yeah. Gary Conway, who did like one issue of Miss Marvel. But
that's a good one because he launched that title, so he had some really cool things to say just about Marvel at that time and Miss Marvel in general. So
he did, and you got my boy Tom DeFalco. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and so I also have a new Fantastic Four interview with him that I recorded just recently that I haven't put up yet as well. Sweet. So that'll be forthcoming.
I'll try to get him on here. I don't know. We'll see if he will. But yeah, he's my hero. So we'll see. You've got. I've listened to some of these. So I've listened to your Steve Englehart Doctor Strange one. You got Ron Friends also, my other boy.
Yep.
And I've listened to all the Claremont ones that are up. Jim Shooter, I didn't know you had him on either. That's awesome.
He was my first interview, actually.
Really?
That was the very first person I talked to, which is just blew my mind because it's Jim Shooter. And it's really cool. That one's very interesting because like that, we talked specifically about the period of time from the Final Threat when they had all of those editor-in-chief changes and stuff. And so you want some behind-the-scenes Marvel drama, you can listen to that one because there's a lot going on.
Oh, I know. Well, he's always very free with his tongue about Marvel drama.
Yeah.
Jim Shooter. If you haven't read Jim Shooter's blog, he hasn't so much been as rambunctious lately, but if you get into like I think 2008, 2009, and get on his blog, I mean, he just like goes in a rant mode, and it's very fun stuff to read.
Yeah.
Just so you guys know. So this is awesome stuff. It's amazing that you've gotten this many creators over the past couple of years.
One of my favorite ones is I got to talk to Larry Lieber, Stanley's brother, who did a lot of writing and drawing in the Golden Age and the early Silver Age, and that was so I got 2 interviews with him, and he is just he's a very, very interesting guy. Those are interesting interviews to listen to, just because he's got a different perspective. He never liked comics, but he did it anyway. That kind of thing. And he's just very modest. He's not very secure in his own abilities, and but he's just a very sweet guy.
Nice.
And I wanted to talk to him again, but once Stan died,
his stuff really gets overlooked in a lot of the collections. I mean, we're getting these like Steve Ditko suspense stories, which I've been lighting you up about and everybody about, because I'm just like, this is the best stuff ever. And of course we get a lot of Jack Kirby everything all the time. That's everything Jack Kirby seems to be reprinted no matter what it is all the time. Yeah. But Larry Lieber stuff gets left out of a lot of this stuff, and it's kind of sad.
He was really, really good at those short 6 to 8 page just anthology stories. He just knocked them out all the time, and they were quite good. His art isn't as strong, but paired with the right inker, and sometimes he inked himself, it still looked great. And he was on the Spider-Man comic strip for years. Like I think he says in one of the interviews that he's the one creator who's been consistently on Spider-Man for the longest, for a longest continuous run, because of the newspaper comic strip.
So here's another thing that Kurtis is involved in that is pretty cool. It's the Library of American Comics.
Yeah.
I know you do a color restoration for a book.
So I'm working as an editor and restorer for the For Better or For Worse. Did you ever read that comic strip? Do you know that one?
I've never read that strip, but
okay.
It's
a family-oriented strip. It's actually a Canadian strip, which is why I love it so much. But it was syndicated all through North America.
I did bring a Canadian on the stream, guys. I'm sorry.
And it's a great, just a family strip about a family that ages in real time. So when the strip started off, they were the kids were 2 and 5 years old, and by the time the strip ended 30 years later, they were married and had kids of their own and that kind of thing. And it's great. And so I'm working with the creator, Lynn Johnston, reprinting her whole thing, where I'm just finishing up my deadlines for volume 4 right now. I do go through and restoring all the Sunday color to the way that it originally looked when it first came out in the newspapers way back when.
That's awesome.
Just like the Epic collections do.
Yeah, I love that restoration process. People don't realize the amount of work for restoration that goes into these collections, I think.
Yeah.
How many hours is it for just a volume of that for you?
Well, one Sunday comic strip, which is 1 page, probably takes me a couple hours to just do the color restorations. So and we collect about 3.5 years or so in one volume. So we're talking like 200 and 250 Sundays. That's a lot of hours.
Yeah.
And that's like, I also write introductory essays for each of the volumes and make sure all the strips are in order. And I work with Dean Mullaney, who's the owner of the company. He does all the other books, and he's fantastic to work with. But both of us are working on that together. It's a big job, but I'm totally happy with the way they've come out. The 3 volumes are out so far, and it's going to be a 9-volume set. And so the Library of American Comics also does...
it's loacomics.org?
Yeah, LOA Comics, Library of American Comics.com is .com. LOAcomics.com.
All right, I'm going to pull this up because this is really cool stuff. And I've just discovered this sort of stuff through you because I've been... I hunt down weird Spider-Man stuff, which is why we transitioned to this topic a little bit. And you were talking about Larry Lieber's doing the strip on Spider-Man. And I just want to find some of the old Spider-Man strips, and they've got old strips of everything. And I'm actually really, especially with the Alex Toth stuff, I'm gonna pick this up as soon as I possibly
Those
can.
Alex Toth books are absolutely
Oh my
beautiful.
gosh.
They're huge. They're oversized,
Which I love.
and they're just fantastic. A lot of it is original art. A lot of it is just comics, and I don't have a volume handy to show off. Otherwise, I would. But if you look in the right hand column there, those are all of the different lines. Some classics like Dick Tracy and Little Orphan Annie. We had a license to do Disney comics for a while because this is an imprint of IDW Comics,
and they also get all the Star Trek and Star Wars strips. I didn't know these Star Trek strips existed, which is so cool.
There's two different lines there. There's the stuff that came out in the UK and the stuff that came out in America, and it's pretty cool stuff. There's a little. Did I say
Tarzan?
Little Orphan Annie? And Tarzan.
My people be very into Tarzan. Yeah.
Tarzan's great. Yeah, that series won an Eisner Award for Dean got an Eisner Award for that one. If you go to click on Chuck Jones, do you see the one that says Chuck Jones?
Chuck Jones. Yep.
This is my first book that I did with them. Chuck Jones, The Dream That Never Was. I discovered a comic strip that Looney Tunes animator Chuck Jones did in the 70s. It only lasted for 6 months. And nobody knows anything about it, or nobody did know anything about it until I uncovered it and did the research and found. I wrote like a 60-page history for this book of this comic strip because it has roots that go back like 27 years before it actually saw print in the newspaper. And then the entire run, except for I think 2 strips that I couldn't find, is reprinted in this book, along with storyboards and a ton of previously unreleased Chuck Jones art. So if you like Looney Tunes and that side of animation, this is a book definitely worth picking up.
Yeah, meeting Kurtis has cost me a lot of money. It's just there's just so many amazing comics out there that like people do not know anything about because again, just nobody talks about anything except for like current issues of Marvel and DC. Yeah. So there's just like this like rabbit hole that like. And I think there's a lot of I think there's kind of like a little, at least a little market for content on this stuff. I think it's interesting, and a lot more people would be interested in this stuff if they knew this existed, because these are truly the best comics that have come out of like our entire civilization, and they're not, and I think people want to find these. It's just they don't know where to.
Well, disclaimer: the Chuck Jones strip is not the greatest comic strip to come out because there is a reason why it only lasted 6 months. But yeah, like Terry and the Pirates is one of the best serialized newspaper dramas, like action adventure strips in history. Like it's so incredibly good, and it's only 6 volumes. And then Milton Caniff, the guy who wrote and drew it, moved on to another book called Steve Canyon, which is also pretty good, but not as good. But Terry and the Pirates is like a high benchmark in terms of action adventure strips. And Dick Tracy's another one that's just fantastic.
I don't know anything about Terry and the Pirates. What's the deal with what's the concept?
So it's this young kid named Terry and his. I don't even know what the relationship is exactly. Pat Ryan is an older guy who they're in communist China, and there's the war is going on over there. This is the 30s that we're talking about, and they're just doing their thing, rescuing people and staying out of trouble and helping the government. And meanwhile, there's the pirates they refer to are Chinese pirates, and it's just there's just so much like a high stake drama and tension.
Is it a lot of World War II stuff, like fighting the Japanese over there?
Once they get into the war years, the strip has a tonal shift, and Terry enlists in the war and becomes a fighter pilot.
It's amazing how much comics did that. I'm reading the Golden Age Namor right now.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm expecting like some weird undersea superhero drama. No, he just literally just goes and fights Nazis every single issue, and that's it.
That was, when the war was going on, it was literally the whole world, right? And not literally the whole world. I don't think Australia had much to do in that, but there was a whole lot going on, and that was, of course, media is going to tie into it, and that happens today. When 9/11 happened,
That's true.
Every
yeah, you're
media outlet had their own like Spider-Man issue where he had his tribute to the World Trade Center and all that kind of stuff. And so when a war lasts for 5 years, like that's going to influence things. And then a lot of the time, the government would go to these outlets and say, can you make propaganda stuff for us? And so like Walt Disney's the perfect example for this. The government went to Walt Disney and said, in exchange for sending your employees to war, can we enlist you in creating war films for us?
Oh, okay.
And so there are some fantastic propaganda films out of Walt Disney that are worth watching. Education for Death is a particularly harrowing one.
This is another rabbit hole I've never gone down, but I'm very interested in now.
I absolutely love the war years of animation history. There is just some fantastic stuff. And of course, Popeye, because he's a sailor, was used big time because he was in the Navy during World War II. And the Eurosap Mr. Jap is one of his cartoons that during the war years, and it's a fantastic one. There's rampant racism, of course, and tons of propaganda, American propaganda in that. But oh yeah, there's one called The Spirit of 43 where Donald Duck, it's a whole cartoon about explaining what income tax is and why the government is creating income tax and why you should pay income tax. And Donald Duck is the
all of a sudden I hate Donald Duck.
Yeah. Well, he didn't want to do it either, and then he realized at the end that it's patriotic to pay taxes, and it's just there's just some wonderful stuff there. But that's the best. That's kind of the highest point of comic strip art as well, is the war years. During the 30s and 40s is kind of the best stuff. And then after the war,
the newspaper strip,
the newspaper comic strips, yes,
yeah.
And then after the war, things shifted for newspaper comic strips, and the sections shrinked. The comics got smaller and smaller, so the high adventure it wasn't as prevalent because you couldn't get the same sort of detail in there in the strips, and a lot more humor strips kind of got more popular at that point,
right.
But the 40s, like the Dick Tracy during the 40s is also fantastic. Little Orphan Annie during the 40s. Yeah, I bet a lot of your listeners, I know a lot of your listeners are probably like Little Orphan Annie because Harold Gray was a staunch Republican and a capitalist. So he put that content into his strip a lot.
Interesting. I've never gone back to any of these. I've just like, I guess, but I mean, I got into this because I was interested in the Spider-Man strip, knowing that Stan Lee had something else that was Spider-Man that he was writing. Yep. I was interested in getting that. And of course, John Romita Sr. drew the ones that came out through the Library of American Comics here.
Some of the volumes, yeah.
Some of
the earlier volumes.
Which is where I'm at right now in the reading. And so I'm very excited about that. But then I go on here and like you said, I found all this stuff. Like Beyond Mars is one I'm very interested in just because I'm a big sci-fi guy. And it's also one book, which makes it easier to deal with.
That one I haven't read, so I can't comment on it. But the art is sure good. It's very similar to Terry and the Pirates in its style. Milton Caniff. It's a Milton Caniff wannabe.
I opened up. They have some preview pages, and they just had some zany. I love zany sci-fi things. And let me see if I can. Beautiful art.
Yeah,
really unbelievable here. But they like. I read the first like 4 preview pages, and they just meet this like weird little green Martian slug thing. I love concepts like this. It just makes me happy. So yeah, that's something else I'm really interested in. It's just there's a ton here, and of course, like you get the strips, which I've never paid any attention to strips, and starting to read strips is very interesting because you're reading these in one volume like this, but everybody else was getting these like one little strip at a time, and then every day, or maybe if it's just a Sunday once a week, and so there's so many reminders of what happened in the strip before. You can skip a lot of the dialogue. Compared to a lot of other comics, because like there's a lot of like in the last strip, Dr. Doom did this, and it's like I know, I just read it,
It's in the in the Spider-Verse comic or storyline that came out a few years ago. The concept for Spider-Verse where it's like Spider-Man and his little team of different Spider-Man travel to all these different alternate versions of Spider-Man. There is one gag in there where they travel to the comic strip, and the bad guy Morlun is very, very confused why people keep repeating themselves every other panel.
That's so funny.
And he's like, I can't take it anymore. I got to get out of here. And then there's one panel saying that this universe will not be touched by Spider-Verse or something like that, because the comic strip was still going on at the time. And that was just a little funny joke there, but totally making fun. It does take a special rhythm to read comic strips. You have to get into a certain mindset when you read them, because it's very, very different than reading comic books, even comic books from the same era as this.
Yeah, I noticed that, but it is a lot of fun. So I've enjoyed that. It's just so much to explore, which is great. All right. We're getting towards the end of the hour. So if anybody has any questions for Kurtis, obviously Kurtis is a huge wealth of knowledge on comics in general, which is awesome. And especially about these Marvel years between the 60s and 90s. So if people are interested in the Epic collections and looking at it, I don't know, what do you think are the best volumes for people to just start with?
That's such a hard question. I mean, it all depends on your tastes. Because I would say you could start with like that volume of Thor that we were talking about, the Tom DeFalco Thor. Just great stuff if you are a fan of classic Marvel, especially Stan and Jack. If you want the Stan and Jack style, but not as wordy and dense as Stan Lee often gets, then go for Tom DeFalco.
Yes. That's a great actual way to explain it. He does have, like, there's an innocence about like the Stan Lee writing style where and like you mentioned, the soap opera, but it's just like there's a little, like, they take it a little less seriously almost than I think a lot of other comic writers do.
Yeah.
And so it adds to the fun of it. But the dialogue's a lot tighter in the Tom DeFalco era than the Stan Lee era. And that's because Stan Lee got paid by the word. So he put as many words as physically possible into things. So, yeah.
Let me see. I got to look at my wall. These two Silver Surfers are really good.
What's the best Spider-Man stuff in Epic Collections, in your opinion?
Oh, man. Okay. Well, probably I'd go with the Stan Lee John Romita stuff. Volume 3 and 4 are really, really good. The Goblin Lives. No.
Yeah.
And what's number 7? Goblin's Last Stand.
Yeah.
Goblin's Last Stand is great. Kraven's Last Hunt is a fantastic story, and the rest of that's only a small portion of that volume. The rest of it is a little hit or miss, but that story is well worth getting it for. A lot of people don't like it, but I really like Eric Larson's Spider-Man with the Return of the Sinister Six.
I can't agree with you there.
I just think that there's some fun stuff. It was an interesting period for Spider-Man there at that point.
It's just like, they definitely dial up the fights, I guess.
Oh, absolutely. But, that was the 90s, though. That was the 90s. The thing is, reading all of these, you have to put yourself in the mindset of reading them in this era. And so, like, if I'm reading a modern comic, I don't want to compare it to comics in the 90s, because I think that's unfair. Because it's a completely different way of doing things. The process is different. The writing is different. The people who have grown up have had different life experiences. And so reading a comic from the 60s is the same thing. I can't read it expecting a comic from the 90s because it's the 1960s. So I have to kind of get my mind into that mindset of like, I'm going to read a 1960s.
It really depends on the 60s. I mean, so from what I've read of the 60s, I think when Stan and Jack hit their stride on Thor, I was so amazed I couldn't even put the volumes down.
Yeah,
I had to like read them back to back, and I couldn't stop. And you're telling me Fantastic Four is going to be like that for me too, which I'm excited to get to.
Once you get to volume 3, volume 3 just takes off, and it goes through like volume 3, 4, and 5. Like there's a straight shot of like, I don't know what it is, 60 issues or something that are just, they're all good. The whole storyline with you get the Inhumans and Galactus and Black Panther and stuff, and it's like one hit after the other, but they have to get there first. And volume 1 and 2 of Fantastic Four are a little more rough because they're still finding their way. I mean, that's
which I enjoyed it as it was, but I wasn't like, I don't know, I wasn't enthralled the way I was with those Thor volumes yet. So I'm excited to get to those. And so like I'd say the first volume of like almost everyone is kind of like that, from what I could tell. And then it kind of like Spider-Man, you said it picks up like in 3-4 also, and Thor seems to do the same. X-Men did not.
No, so you did not like volume 3, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, there were like 3 or 4 issues toward the very end with Roy Thomas that, once they introduced like Havoc, it kind of got interesting. But before that, it was like, ooh, this is like the worst epic I've read probably.
So I tried I tried reading through all of the Silver Age a few years back, and I gave up on X-Men before I got to that point. So I haven't read volume 3 yet,
Nice.
but volume 3 and volume 4 I'm really looking forward to. If you want to start with X-Men, Chris Claremont's stuff with Second Genesis, volume 5 is it's so good. And hopefully once they get knocking those volumes out, it's going to be a ton of good stuff. Another volume I really like is Doctor Strange number 3, A Separate Reality. There's just some really nutty, kooky stuff there. I really like that. The second Punisher volume, Circle of Blood, has really good stuff there.
Yeah, that's Mike Barron's stuff too. So yeah. And
the Peter David Hulk stuff, Ghost of the Past, is
I'm
really good.
I'm not loving Peter David Hulk as much, but I'm not in the Epic Collection elements yet. So I am starting Peter David's run in the Visionaries spot, which is the beginning of his deal. And it's very different because it's got that gray Hulk Mr. Fix-It thing. Yeah. And I kind of just don't like that. Well,
it gets very different. It also, once he gets the green back and he gets his intelligence, and that's when Peter David really starts expanding the supporting cast, and he really finds his footing once the gray stuff is over with. So if you can get past that, then you're going to, hopefully, I think you'll have a much more fun time.
All right. I like Peter David. I've read a lot of his stuff over the years. Some of his X Factor stuff was really fun. And I've read a lot of his novels because I originally, more than comics, I was really into the Star Trek novelizations growing up. And he seemed to write like 2 or 3 a year for a period there. And it was, he did a really great job of those. So, but yeah, I guess those are right. And then I stepped on your Silver Surfer recommendations of 6 and 7. Because I got the question there.
Those are really great. Now, especially if you're interested in Thanos and the Infinity stuff because of the movies, Volume 6 is all of like the leading up of how Thanos got the gems and got the gauntlet, put the gauntlet together. Really, really cool stuff. There's actually more of a Thanos volume than it is a Silver Surfer volume. The highlight in this, though, is there is a short story. Is it in this volume or the other volume? It's at the beginning of this story. At this volume, Silver Surfer goes to a city called Dynamo City.
Yes, this is great. Which you'll note the Dynamo City's first initials, which is called DC. Yeah.
So when Jim Starlin came back to Marvel to do Silver Surfer, he had a huge falling out with DC, and so the story of Dynamo City is Jim Starlin's love letter to DC Comics. It's just all about how he was mistreated, how the artists are mistreated, and when
everybody's a slave.
When you know that subtext, that story is fascinating.
It really is. Yep. And you did a podcast on that. That was actually one of the first podcasts of yours that I listened to.
And the Jim Starlin interview. It's the Silver Surfer. Okay.
So that that's what got me into the Marvel Epic podcast. Yeah.
Fantastic. Cool. Yeah, that's really good stuff. What else is there on here?
I thought Moon Knight was something that I checked out. Somebody mentioned Moon Knight in the chat a little earlier too. I checked it out sight unseen. I had never read really any Moon Knight or cared about it whatsoever. And those were 3 very gripping volumes also. Yeah. So
definitely. And volume 3 trails off a little bit at the end once Doug Mensch leaves the book, but there's some great issues, including my favorite issue of Moon Knight is in volume 3. It's called Hit It, and Bill Sienkiewicz is just on fire with that issue. It's really
Bill Sienkiewicz's art in Moon Knight is so beyond its time. I was just like, it's beautiful to look at. It really is. And Doug Bench's writing all the way through those volumes is just absolutely solid. You could tell. I don't know. Was this before he wrote It was before he wrote Batman, right? I think.
No. I don't think so. I think it's after. Yep.
After?
Because he was writing Batman in the 80s. That's when Tim Drake.
Right.
No, that's when Jason Todd got killed. Yeah. This was after.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that makes sense then. So he's had those chops of those like mystery comics and with the billionaire with the weird gadgets and things like that happening for a long time. And so he was able to translate that really well. And I think Moon Knight, just because of his like weird multiple personalities, actually is a little more compelling than Batman at the end of the day.
Yeah, you can take him down different story paths because you can get stories about the rich and elite. You get stories about the down and out. You get stories about what's his other personality, the military. And so there's so many different avenues you can go for storytelling there. It's really cool.
Yeah,
and it all fits.
Really good. All right. Well, that sets us in an hour. I hope you guys will check out the Epic Marvel podcast down below and join the discussion group on Facebook. I put that in there just because that's my favorite spot to talk about comics. And is there anything else you want to plug? Do you want to plug your Library of American Comics stuff so people buy that? Does that matter to you?
Yeah, sure. Just the For Better or For Worse series. It's not at all like comic books. It's not superheroes, but it's just a really sweet soap opera. Pardon me, soap opera kind of a story. Great cartooning, very funny. All three of those volumes there. Yeah. Other than that, buy more Epic collections. I'm not employed by Marvel, but I like pushing these books anyway.
Yeah, I mean, we want them definitely to complete these lines. I posed a what if to you if they just announced, because DC cancels all their lines pretty much always with their collections like this. You'll get like a volume 1 and then like there's like a 4-volume series and they'll like cancel volume 2s, 3s, and 4 almost always with DC. Marvel's a lot better about that, to be honest.
At the same time though, it's like they got so far with the essentials and then they just stopped them. I would hate for the same thing to happen where we're like, and especially with the out of order nature of the Epic collection, it would be awful if they just stopped the line and we were like 4 volumes short of our 25-volume run, and it's like holes right in through here and there throughout.
I don't see a replacement for the Epics coming, unlike the Essentials though, because the Essentials, because they didn't have the colors, and once it became easier to reprint colors like this, it just that was like a technology thing that just like the Essentials just kind of got what do you call it, obsolete.
It did, yeah. With the news and the more newsprint paper and all that kind of stuff. Sam has one comment in here. I just want to say, he says Marvel should stop making new stuff and reprint their older stuff. The only argument I would have against that is that the new stuff sells way better than the older stuff. So in a lot of the cases, the new stuff is providing the resources to actually pay for the reprints, these old reprints that we like. So I think they should keep on doing the new stuff.
That's a good point.
Because without it, I don't think we would get more of the reprints of the older stuff.
Logic. All right.
Yep.
Okay, guys. Thanks for coming on, Kurtis. And this is it. Check everything out. Enjoy what you like, and have a good weekend, everybody. See ya.
See ya.